On a blistering summer day, Lily's life spun wildly out of control. Once charming and sweet, her love for Tom had morphed into something darker, an obsession. It started innocuously enough. She would check his phone when he wasn't looking, curious about who he was texting. Soon, she convinced herself she was simply being a good girlfriend, keeping their relationship strong. But the deeper she dug, the more suspicious she became, twisting even the most innocent gestures into betrayals in her mind. Tom had no idea how closely Lily watched him. The quiet moments, when he thought he was alone, weren't his own anymore. She tracked his every move, following him home from work, monitoring his conversations, certain that at any moment he would prove her right. He was slipping away from her. Her paranoia festered, and her need to control him grew. One evening, Tom received a message from his old college friend, Rachel, inviting him for a drink. He hesitated before replying. The invitation was innocent, but he knew how Lily would react if she found out. So, he didn't tell her. That night, Lily's phone buzzed. It was an alert from the GPS app she had secretly installed on Tom's phone. Her heart raced as she saw his location pop up at a downtown bar, miles away from where he said he'd be. Without hesitation, she grabbed her keys and stormed out the door, her mind seething with imagined betrayals. When she arrived, she spotted Tom laughing with Rachel at a corner table. They were sitting close, but nothing suggested anything inappropriate, except to Lily. To her, this was it, the proof she had been waiting for. Lily watched them for a few moments, her chest tightening with every second. She knew Rachel, a former friend before Tom came into her life. Now, she only saw her as a threat, someone determined to steal Tom away. Tom's phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Lily, her words sharp and accusatory. "Having fun? Thought you said you were at work." He looked at the message, dread filling his eyes. He told Rachel he needed to leave, but as he stood up, he found himself face to face with Lily. She stood there, her face twisted with rage. "You lied to me," she hissed, her voice trembling with a dangerous edge. "Lily, it's not what you think. Don't you dare lie again." She cut him off, glancing at Rachel with venom in her eyes. "This is what you've been doing behind my back?" Rachel, startled, tried to speak up. "Lily, it's just a catch-up." "Stay out of this," Lily snapped, her voice rising. Tom gently grabbed her arm, trying to guide her outside, away from the escalating scene. But Lily pulled back, her emotions spiraling out of control. Back at Tom's apartment, the air was thick with tension. Tom attempted to explain, but Lily wasn't listening. Her thoughts were consumed by the idea that she had lost control, that Rachel had taken something that was hers. As Tom tried to calm her down, Lily's desperation turned into something far more dangerous. Her hands shook as she pushed him, her voice escalating. In that heated moment, it happened. She grabbed the heavy vase from the coffee table, one she had gifted him months ago, and swung it wildly. The impact was swift, sharp, and final. Tom collapsed, blood pooling beneath his head, the room falling into an eerie silence. Lily froze, staring in disbelief at what she had done. The vase slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, but the noise barely registered. Her world had stopped. Tom wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. Her control, once so fierce, had turned deadly. The police would come soon. The neighbors would hear the sirens. But for Lily, time no longer mattered. All she saw was the man she had loved lying lifeless at her feet, a victim of her own obsession. As the gravity of her actions set in, Lily's breath quickened. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding, unable to tear her eyes away from Tom's still body. The once cozy apartment, The place where they had shared so many moments was now a crime scene. Panic clawed at her insides. What had she done? Her love, her need for control, had spiraled into something monstrous. She glanced at her phone, her fingers trembling. The screen flashed with unread messages, some from Tom, others from Rachel, and now a string of missed calls from an unknown number. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed he hadn't come back. The police would come, and she had no explanation, no way to make sense of the rage that had gripped her. For a moment, she thought about fleeing, just running, disappearing, as if she could outrun the consequences. But where would she go? She knew she couldn't hide from this. Her hands hovered over Tom's body. Should she try to revive him? Call for help? But as she reached out, she knew it was too late. The heavy vase had done its damage, and the blood that now stained the carpet felt like an irreversible stain on her life. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning in the door snapped her out of her paralysis. The door creaked open, and standing there, wide-eyed and frozen, was Rachel. She had come looking for Tom, worried when he hadn't replied to her texts. Her eyes darted from Lily to Tom's body, horror spreading across her face as she realized what had happened. "Lily, what did you do?" Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. Lily's mouth opened, but no words came. What could she say? Every excuse, every explanation she had practiced in her head evaporated in the face of reality. Her obsession, her inability to let go, had led her here. There was no way to talk her way out of this. Rachel stepped closer, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. "We need to call the police," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She pulled out her phone, but Lily lunged at her, grabbing her wrist. "No!" Lily's voice was hoarse, desperate. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to. He pushed me. I just—" Rachel yanked her hand free, stepping back. "Lily, you need help," she said, her voice stronger now, more resolute. "This isn't going away." The room felt as though it were closing in on Lily. Every second dragged out like an eternity. She knew Rachel was right, but the fear of what would come next, the trial, the media, the punishment, froze her in place. "Don't call anyone. Please, Rachel. Just help me." Tears filled her eyes, her voice pleading. She had never been this vulnerable, never needed anyone like this before. But it was too late for begging. Rachel's eyes were filled with disgust and pity, and there was no turning back now. Rachel, her hand shaking, pressed the number for the police, her voice steady as she gave the address. As she ended the call, she looked at Lily one last time, her face filled with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. "Why, Lily? Why did you do this?" Rachel asked, her voice hollow. Lily crumpled to the floor beside Tom's body, her hands stained with his blood, the weight of her obsession crashing down around her. "Because I loved him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I couldn't let him go. I couldn't let anyone take him from me." Minutes later, the wail of sirens echoed in the distance, getting closer and closer. The piercing sound of sirens grew louder, inching closer to the apartment, marking the inevitable end to everything Lily had known. She sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, numb to the chaos around her. Rachel stood by the door, glancing between Lily and Tom's lifeless body, struggling to comprehend how quickly everything had unraveled. Lily's mind raced, fragments of memories, good and bad, flashing before her eyes. The laughter she and Tom had once shared, the moments of tenderness, and how all of it had slowly eroded, replaced by paranoia and fear. Her obsessive need to control every part of his life had smothered him, and now it had killed him. The police arrived in a flurry of flashing lights and heavy boots. The first officer through the door took in the scene with a practiced eye. The broken vase, the blood-soaked carpet, Tom's motionless body. His partner, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward, her expression hardening as she assessed the situation. "Ma'am, step away from the body," the female officer said firmly, her voice slicing through the haze in Lily's mind. She didn't resist as she was pulled up from the floor, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The officer's grip tightened as she guided Lily toward the couch, seating her gently but firmly. Rachel, still hovering near the door, explained everything in short, choked sentences. How she had come looking for Tom and found Lily standing over him. The officers took notes, their faces unreadable, but it was clear that this wasn't a mystery. The scene was all too familiar, an intimate relationship turned violent. Lily sat there, barely aware of the questions being asked, her voice mechanical as she answered them. Yes, it was an accident. No, she didn't plan it. Yes, she loved him. Yes, she had been scared. The words came out in a hollow monotone, but none of it mattered anymore. Nothing could change what had happened. As the paramedics arrived and confirmed what everyone already knew, that Tom was gone, the weight of her actions crushed her. She had spent months convincing herself that everything she did was out of love, but now she realized it was never about love. It had always been about control, about fear of losing him, about her inability to accept that someone could choose to walk away. The officers read her rights as they placed the cold metal cuffs around her wrists, but the words barely registered. All Lily could see was Tom's face, the way he had looked at her in those last moments. Shocked, confused, terrified. She had wanted to keep him close, but in the end, she had pushed him further away than she ever thought possible. Outside, neighbors gathered behind police tape, whispering and speculating as Lily was led out of the apartment, her head hanging low. The lights of the squad cars reflected off the pavement, casting eerie shadows across the quiet street. Rachel watched from the doorway, her face pale, her eyes distant. The friendship they once had was shattered, like the vase on the floor, broken beyond repair. As the car door slammed shut, Lily's mind drifted to the future. There would be trials, interviews, and judgment from people who would never understand what had truly happened. But none of it mattered to her now. The only thing that mattered was that she had destroyed the one thing she had tried so desperately to control, and in doing so, she had destroyed herself. The drive to the police station was suffocating. The inside of the squad car felt too small, the air too thick. Lily sat motionless, her wrists bound by cold metal cuffs, staring out the window at the city she once knew, but now felt foreign. She barely registered the people on the streets, the mundane scenes of life continuing, while hers had come to a crashing halt. At the station, the processing was quick. Her fingerprints were taken, her photo snapped. Just another criminal in the system. Lily couldn't feel anything anymore. The tears had stopped hours ago. Now, there was only the numbness. She had played the scene over and over in her mind, but it always ended the same, with Tom lying on the floor and her world crumbling. They placed her in a small, dimly lit cell. The clang of the door locking behind her echoed through the silence, a sound that seemed to finalize her fate. Alone now, with no distractions, the weight of everything she had done settled on her chest like a stone. She sank onto the thin cot in the corner, her mind flickering back to Tom's smile, the way he used to look at her with love. When had that love turned to fear? When had her desire to keep him close turned into something so twisted, so dangerous? She tried to pinpoint the moment she had crossed that invisible line, but it was impossible. It had been gradual, creeping in until it consumed everything. The hours passed slowly, each one a painful reminder of the life she had thrown away. She knew the trial would come soon enough. Her lawyer, the judge, the jury. They would pick apart her life, her mind, her relationship with Tom. The media would paint her as a monster, a jealous, obsessive girlfriend who let her darkest impulses take over. And maybe they'd be right. Lily wasn't sure if she could argue against it anymore. What else could she say? There was no justification for what she had done, no way to undo the damage. She had destroyed Tom's life and hers with one moment of uncontrolled rage. She had always thought that love could fix anything, but now she realized it was never about love. It had always been about her fear, her obsession, her desperate need to possess him. The days blurred together in a haze of legal proceedings and sterile conversations with her lawyer. Plea deals were discussed, but Lily hardly cared. She had nothing left to fight for. In the end, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The courtroom felt distant, the voices of the judge and attorneys muffled as they pronounced her fate. Lily was sentenced to 25 years, with the possibility of parole after 15. The words felt empty, a formality, as if she had already been sentenced long before that day. As she was led away from the courtroom, she caught a glimpse of Rachel sitting in the back, her face unreadable. Their eyes met for a brief moment, but there was no recognition left between them, no shared history, just a hollow silence. In prison, time moved differently. Days stretched on endlessly, blending into each other until they became indistinguishable. Lily spent most of her time alone, avoiding the other inmates, lost in her own thoughts. She had nothing but time now, time to think about what she had done, time to face the empty future that awaited her. Every night, as she lay in her cell, she thought about Tom, his laugh, his warmth, his life that had ended far too soon. She would never escape the guilt, the crushing weight of knowing she had taken away his future and her own. As the years passed, Lily's face aged, her body grew tired, but the memory of that day never faded. It lingered in her mind like a ghost, haunting her, reminding her of the price she had paid for her obsession. And in the end, it wasn't the prison walls that kept her trapped. It was her own mind, a prison she had built long before that fateful day, a prison she would never escape.